Hello, everyone. Good morning. Good morning. The Director General, Office of Education Quality Assurance, in person of Mrs. Abiola Seriki Ayeni, the facilitator from Mirai Partners, Ms. Christine Nasigodse, all school leaders here present, all directors here present, great evaluators, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Welcome to another edition of the Education Quality Assurance Professional Training Series. We are now in the second series of this professional training. Today's not yet the sixth module in all, promises to be very entertaining, very educative. So in the first series, we've done about 5 modules in the past. We've talked about the last one was just ethics. We had ethics. That was the last target that we had. And we've done other modules in the past too. Trying to. Okay, so I'll also be calling the very soon. I'll be calling the DG to introduce us to today's module, and today's the theme of today's training. However, please know that we are stream living this. We are live on our YouTube page, oeqalagos.com, and you can also get all the past modules on our website, www.lagoslearnstogether.com, under the tab PD with the DG. So let's get started. DG, ma, good morning, ma. If anybody can hear me, I don't know if anybody can hear me. Please let us have your names and your district where you're representing, your school. Let us have it in the chat box. And please know, once the training starts fully, please just pay attention to pens and paper. There will be time for introduction to the training. Earlier, I said we've had series of this professional training. We've had the school development plan. That was the first module we had in the first series of this training. Then we had the self-evaluation training. Then after that, we had using the school improvement coach. Please know that all these trainings can be found on our YouTube page at oeqalagos.com. And it is also on our website, www.lagoslearnstogether.com. We also had a training on difficult conversation. We had another one on conducting lesson observation. And the most recent we had on Thursday was ethics. So today is the second series of the training will be introduced by the DG. Let me not let the cat out of the bag. DG, ma'am, if you're online, man, you can hear us. The floor is open, ma'am. Okay, while we are with the DG's introduction, please, can we have your names and districts that you represent in the chat box? Okay, good morning. I can see that we have a representative from District 3. It's your good morning. I can see people from District 1, Adige Zone 3, Fakwajaye, Mr. Adora, good morning. Mr. J. Ajagbe from Zone 16, good morning. We also have people from District 5, Ajiv, good morning. Good morning to you all. We have representatives from the verification and documentation unit in the headquarters here. Good morning. Good morning So everybody, please keep the introductions coming in while we wait the introduction to the team. Is on YouTube at oeqalagos.com, and you can also find all our trainings, all the www.lagoslearnstogether.com under the tab PD with the DG. Okay, so as I said earlier, you use modules on our website, www.lagoslearnstogether.com. And we also, under the tab PD with the DG, we also have this streaming, we are streaming live, and it's also on our OEQA channel at oeqalagos.com. So very soon we have an introduction to today's theme, as I will not be letting the cat out of the bag. DG Ma, if you're ready for us, please. We have about
good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's session on powerful outcomes, objectives, and feedback. Thank you so much for your feedback. For your patience today. We normally do start right at 10, but we started a little later today. So thank you so much. We have almost 50 people online. I'm expecting more people to come in. I will be driving this session today. Mrs. Nasser Gotsi is not around today. So it's very interesting because now we begin our second series that is focused on quality teaching and learning. So we began the first 6 sessions. We're focused on quality assurance essentials and really making sure that we have the right foundation as we go about ensuring quality in our schools, either as evaluators or as proprietors or school leaders. This is all essentially a concern of everyone. So now we're focusing on teaching and learning, quality of the provision of teaching and learning. And this is a favorite for me. As a classroom teacher, I know firsthand how challenging it is at times to juggle all the different things that we may have going on in the classroom, right? There are many expectations. Even now that COVID has happened, those expectations have sort of shot through the roof. So now, essentially, we're going back to basics, right? We're going back to basics with today's session, which is focused on outcomes, objectives, and feedback, okay? And it's really focused on how we're able to plan for this at the planning stage, the preparation stage, and then how do we plan for execution? How have we ensured that we have planned everything and embedded it in our lesson plans, in our use of resources, in our understanding of our students, in our differentiation, okay? So I'm really excited about this session. Unfortunately, we won't be here for 90 minutes. We'll be here for roughly an hour due to the time constraints of the day, but all of the materials will be available on lagoslearnstogether.com. shortly after. And of course, this is be available on YouTube. It's currently live stream on YouTube, and it will be available after the session on YouTube also. So let's dig in. Fauzia, if you could please just share the presentation.
Okay, it would take me about 2 minutes to get
You have
the.
not seen you, and I've not seen your hand.
So. Okay, dear participants, please know that you can use the chat box to share your comments and contributions. So in about 2 minutes, I'll be sharing the screen.
I see some people are complaining of bad network. It seems to be a common theme of the day. I'm also experiencing a bit of network issues. So as a result of that, I'll mostly be using the audio while sharing the screen, as opposed to using the video for today's session. And also just to make sure that we're able to get in as much in the short period of time that we're here today. So we're just waiting for the session to get started with the sharing of the PowerPoint, please.
Please, can anybody see the screen? If you can, please let us know in the chat box.
Good morning. I'm just going to skip through the welcome so that we can just jump in. Thank you so much. So these are the ways of working. We ensure to be present, avoid distractions, making sure that we participate using the chat box for questions, and please make sure that you actually do the activities. So this is the agenda for today. We have done an introduction as to why this is important. We know that the secret to planning interesting, relevant lessons really focuses on having effective objectives and striving for powerful outcomes. What we will be expecting of you today is to ensure that you are able to think through the characteristics of top-notch objectives and outcomes, and how you are able to guide teachers to lesson planning success. Again, I'm going to run through this because of time.
Their participants, sorry, I'm just trying to share a second screen. It seems my slide hanging, but I'll be switching to another device now shortly.
Okay, so in creating objectives, it's not just one, right? Objectives are also focused on the outcomes and the feedback loop. It's not just about setting fancy objectives to put on the board, and then no one really focuses on it, or nothing really comes of it. This trio of objective outcomes and feedback can be very powerful in increasing learning outcomes for your students. Students also feel more confident in what the expectation is. We want to make sure that the objectives, the outcomes, the feedback all work together so that children can actually be successful. When we set about objectives that have nothing to do with the lesson that we've taught, or have nothing to do with the larger road we're trying to tread, it becomes a problem because it doesn't tell the teacher anything. Setting good objectives that are focused on outcomes that are feasible, and then ensuring feedback loops are very helpful within the classroom. Sorry for the technical issues. Now, when we're creating objectives, we want to make sure okay, yes, right here, thank you. We want to make sure that our objectives are specific and that they're powerful. There's a list of verbs that I'm going to share shortly with you all that you can use to really help you think about how you can ensure that they're powerful. We want to make sure that we're creating opportunities for students to set targets for themselves. Oftentimes, we don't think of objectives as something that should be student-based, but As we create objectives and we understand the importance that objectives have in learning outcomes, we know it's even more relevant and more important for students to be able to set these targets for themselves. Lastly, we want to be able to evaluate tools for providing feedback to students. So this is part of the participation that we'll be doing. How are you able to model this? How are you able to model this? What are your personal learning intentions for this workshop? So what do you expect to learn? If we're expecting students to be creating their own learning outcomes and objectives, then of course, I want you to think through the process of what it actually takes to do that. So in the chat box, I want you to think through and indicate what your own personal learning intentions are for this workshop. And then secondly, do any of your objectives reflect your areas of strength or your areas of development? So this is two things I want you to do in the chat box now. I want you to think through what your personal learning intentions for this workshop are, and then if they reflect your strengths or areas of development. I'm going to give you about 2 minutes to do this. Please make sure this is being done in the chat box. Of course, we know I can always call on people. I don't really have anyone participating at this moment. Remember, we are able to get more out of the session when we participate.
So it means I'll be randomly calling people. I can see a hand raised up. Mr. Michael Taiwo, maybe you'd like to give us your contributions. Please unmute yourself and let us know what you think. Michael Taiwo, your hands, you have your hands raised. If Mr. Michael is not ready, please can we have Mrs. Bade Moshe Aderunke's contribution? Please unmute yourself and let us have your contributions, please.
Okay.
You can also use it.
So I'm just going to assume that you are bored, right? It may just seem boring. Where do I start? I don't know what I want to learn. And that may be the case when you're thinking through for students also. It's always important to have this trio together. Next slide. So objectives enable teachers to set clear and even differentiated outcomes for students that link to high-level learning. We've talked about this earlier on. It's really important to understand that objectives are not a list of activities. I repeat, objectives are not a list of activities. For the purpose of time, I'm going to move through some of the interactive parts of this session today, but they will be available in the deck for you to use moving forward. So If objectives are not activities, they're definitely not a list of tasks, and they are not what the students are necessarily just doing. I'm trying to see if anyone has shared any objectives, but I don't think we really have any here. Okay. Obviously, you know, for those of us that are using the schema of work, this is often central in creating objectives, but it's not just copy and paste of the activities that our students are expected to do. Okay. Okay. Now, objectives are what and how your students are learning. So the objectives include how and what. Okay, so look at this example here. Divide 3-digit numbers by single-digit numbers. It's just an instruction. It's not an objective. We want to be able to tell students, it's like a roadmap. We want to be able to tell them what they're expecting for the day. And we also want to be able to tell them how we are expecting them to be able to get to that place. So before a change, divide 3-digit numbers by single-digit numbers. Seems simple. Okay, it's on the board is an objective. Now look at this one changed. Apply understanding of place value to divide 3-digit numbers. So we're telling them how we are expecting them, what part of their prior knowledge we're expecting them to activate to do this assignment. So apply understanding of place value to divide 3-digit numbers. Significantly better. The second one that's here, create word problems with real-world examples of division of 3-digit numbers. Create word problems with real-world examples of division of 3-digit numbers. So for this, you're still getting an understanding that they actually have mastered this concept of the division of 3-digit numbers. We're encouraging the students to make real-world connections by telling them that the word problems have to be based on real-world examples and not just something they found in a book. Next slide. I always like to look through the top level of Bloom's taxonomy. Of course, Bloom's taxonomy is there for a reason. There are lower level thinking skills and there are higher level thinking skills. Typically, most people tend to focus on the lower end because it just seems easier and it doesn't require heavy lifting, okay? We want to be able to select at a reasonable pace top level Bloom's taxonomy. That does not mean that we're not using the lower level parts of Bloom's taxonomy, like identification and all. No, it doesn't mean we're not using it. We're using it, but we're not staying there. We're focusing on reaching higher to those higher level thinking orders. We also want to focus on visible learning. How can we see that students are learning? How can we make it more tangible? And that really has to do with the type of outcomes, the type of products that we're expecting students to produce to showcase their learning. What's wrong with this objective? Understand the point of view of the main character. So remember, part of what we talked about is you participating. And I want you to think through what is wrong with this particular objective. Understand the point of view of the main character. I see some of you have written, indicated in the chat, objectives are what teachers intend to teach. Okay, someone has said that. Someone also mentioned, this is Michael Luguyemi, it should be student-centered. We as instructors often have a good idea of what we want to accomplish in a course. We want to cover certain topics, or we want to teach students certain ideas and skills. We should also think in terms of what we want the students to be able to do at the end of the course. Absolutely. We also want to make sure that we are aligned to standards, right? It's beautiful to have these lofty objectives for your students, but if they're not focused in the standards, how are you able to gauge that you've actually gotten to the point that you're supposed to with these set students and that they've reached mastery? So it's important to not just focus on activities that are fun and great and awesome, but they have to be working in tandem with standards, and they have to be working towards those higher level thinking skills. Now, the next slide is really focused on Bloom's taxonomy. So we look at the first level, has to do with knowledge. How can they show that they have basic knowledge of the topic at hand? So these are some of the verbs that you could use for your objectives: define, identify, describe, tell, explain, memorize, quote. One step further is focusing on understanding this topic, right? So we want to make sure that students go a step further. Like I said, these are building blocks, and sometimes you have to go back to step 1 or step 2. It is okay, in as much as the focus is getting to 6, getting to the final stage of Bloom's taxonomy focused on creation. So you want to make sure you have a healthy mix of this. And when we're thinking through differentiation, and if you're thinking through the different types of students you may have in your classroom, Bloom's taxonomy is a perfect way to be able to help you, to guide you on meeting students at different levels. Okay, so everyone is able to analyze, but maybe some students will contrast, compare and contrast. Maybe some students will illustrate. Maybe some students will categorize. They're all an analyzing. Okay, so it's great to be able to break up these larger umbrella of verbs into more tangible activities for your objectives. Next slide. Next slide. Okay, so this particular Revive Bloom's taxonomy, I really love it. The reason why I really like it is because it brings everything together. It brings those action words. It brings the overall arching Bloom's taxonomy concepts like creating, evaluating, analyzing, but it has now embedded the product. Okay, it has now embedded the product. Please go back. It has now embedded the product. So some of you may have not seen this before, but what is different about this particular one is that the product is not there. I mean that the product is here. So this is the revised version of Bloom's taxonomy that I actually really enjoy. Can we confirm that we're on the same slide? Please, can you all tell me what you see? Because, okay, I'm seeing the Bloom's taxonomy revised, and now content, process, and product. Okay, so these are different ways in which we can tie everything together: the content, the process of teaching, and then the actual product. I mentioned earlier on that it really focuses on differentiation at the end of the day. So the content is what we want students to learn. Okay, so an example, causes of the Civil War. The process is how we're expecting them to do that. Okay, the process begins when students stop taking in information and begin to work actively with it. So you've given them the content, then you want them to do something with this content. That is focused on the process, and that's where that that those key verbs are coming into play, analyze, then how would they show that they've analyzed? Okay, the product needs to be embedded. The product, there are ways that students show what they have come to know, understand, and be able to do. They must have a product to show for. In this example, it focuses on writing an argumentative essay regarding the most important cause of the Civil War. Look at all three: content, process, and product are all focused on the Civil War. But based on where your focus is and you're differentiating, the objective has changed. Next slide. Now, this is an objective makeover. And what I want you to do is look at these. I want you to look at these 6 quote unquote objectives. I want you to think through how you can rewrite them. So look at 1, learn the molecular formula for water. 2, define similes and metaphors. 3, define the causes of the Second World War. 4, identify the parts of speech in a series of sentences. 5, classify species. And 6, read 3-letter words. So look at these 6 and choose anyone. Choose anyone to rewrite and indicate that in the chat box. I want to be able to help you. So we're going to step back in the next few slides, just so that you can see some of the things to keep in mind. So take a snapshot of the one you think you want to change, and look at this Bloom's taxonomy revised. Look at the different levels from remembering to creating. Look at the product for each level of the higher order thinking skills. So for instance, a product for remembering, the lowest level, is a quiz or definition or a worksheet or a test or a workbook or a list. When you are moving up to applying, the products focus on illustration, interview, performance, a journal, a presentation, a demonstration. When you move up a little bit, for analyzing, checklist, outline, database, survey. For evaluation, reports. The product is a report, a speech, a conclusion, a verdict, an investigation. And then the last one, in terms of creation, this highest level order of thinking skills, maybe creating a new game, maybe writing a song, a project, a story, a film, an advertisement or advertisement. Look at how different the spectrum could be depending on the higher order thinking skills you're expecting students to demonstrate. Let's move back to that list of outcomes that need or that require change. And I'll give you about 2 minutes to do this, please.
We have some comments coming into the chat box. We have one from Mr. Michael Ogunyemi. He says, define similes and metaphors. Describe what you understand by similes and metaphors. So he has rearranged define similes and metaphors, and he has said, describe what you understand by similes and metaphors. Please, we hope to see more comments here in the chat box.
I also want you to remember that as we create these objectives, we are focusing on the verbs, yes, but we're also focusing on how, what is the roadmap? Remember, there was a previous example where we said for that math question, where the revised objective was for children, for the child to show their use of value, skills, or something, right? So we could say, okay, solve this problem, or we could say, using your understanding of, you know, value system or 3-digit value system, do this. So in as much as we've said, describe what you understand by similes and metaphors, where are we driving? Someone else said, okay, describe in your own words. Okay, that's a little bit better. Can we go back a few slides? Okay, let's round up. Okay, so look at this objectives for this objectives before and after. So the verb, obviously, there's just divide. Divide 3-digit numbers by single-digit numbers. Look at what it says for after. Apply understanding of place value. We're telling them what road we expect them to take. That's one way. This second one is focusing on the highest level of higher thinking skills. Create word problems with real world examples of division of 3-digit numbers. Okay, so we'll just continue from there on. Now we really want to focus on setting outcomes and targets. So we've talked about the objectives and we've talked about the fact that they work together, the objectives, the outcomes, and the feedback. So this is a nice little activity here. For outcomes, true or false, and please indicate it in the chat box. Students may have different learning outcomes based on an objective. Students may have different learning outcomes based on an objective. True or false? Achieving different learning objectives require different tasks. Achieving different learning objectives requires different tasks. Like I said, because of time, we won't be able to wait so much for participation. This will all be available to you after the session. Next. So what might be different outcomes for the same objectives? How can we create different outcomes from the same objective? And this is really where differentiation comes into play. When we're thinking through the work that we have to do with all of the students that are on different levels. Our students are on different levels, but we want to make sure that we reach the same objective. So number one, can we give them choice? Can we give them choice to show that they've reached that objective? Sometimes that takes more planning on part of the teacher, and it requires more flexibility also. But the results are just phenomenal when you are able to really differentiate the outcomes that your students have within a classroom. And this is not going to be all the time. Okay, I'm not saying children should be having choice for every single assignment they have, but it's good to have a balance so that children have different opportunities to showcase that, yes, indeed, they've reached mastery on this topic based on their interest. Next step. Okay, this is based on research, and this Haddies and Yates is they're researchers that have really looked into the purpose, and they've used research to actually talk about teacher effectiveness and what role of what the teacher does, right? What role it plays and how effective the different aspects of what a teacher does has on student learning. So I want you to think through and to try to fill in the blank here. The vital role that blank plays in assisting learners to improve their performances has been recognized from the beginnings of behavioral science some 150 years ago. Blank was associated with an effective size of 0.73, almost one whole point, indicating it is one of the most powerful factors implicated in academic learning and student achievement. So what goes in the blank and why? The vital role that blank plays, and this is overall, I'll give you a hint, is not outcomes or objectives, but they're very much closely related. Okay, the vital role that blank plays in assisting learners to improve their performances has been recognized from the beginnings of behavioral science. Blank was associated with an effect size of 0.73, indicating it is one of the most powerful factors implicated in academic learning. So I'm going to give you about 1 minute to just indicate that in the chat. What do you think that blank is? What do you think that blank is? What is shown to have the most impact on as to what a teacher does, the most impact on student learning? The tech team is having issues.
So we have some hands raised up. I can see Mr. Okileye wants to give his contribution on what he feels blank is. So Mr. Okileye, please give us your contributions, please. Unmute yourself.
It's Mrs. Okele, not Mr.
Oh, sorry about that. I beg your pardon, Mrs. Ukele.
At that blank, I put that the teachers play. I can't see the screen again. My screen is not showing, but I've written it in the chat box. That the vital roles that the teachers play in the life of the learner. I can't see my screen again, please. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. I believe Fauzia is having some technical difficulty with the sharing of the screen, but please go ahead with your feedback.
Good morning, my DJ ma. I said I can't see my screen, ma, but I have put it in the chat box that blank should be a teacher, that the teachers play in the life of the. I can't see the screen again. I want to read it out.
Okay, this
yes, ma.
Screen will be coming up in about a minute. So you're saying the blank is teachers.
Yes, ma'am.
Mrs. Okelaye, what do you say the blank is?
Teacher.
Okay, so they're talking about what part of what a teacher does.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, something about what the teacher does has the most impact.
Most important, yes.
So it's not saying, it's not disputing that teachers play a significant role, but what aspect of what a teacher does has the most significant role? We may have to move on as soon as they're able to share the screen.
Okay, ma'am.
So someone has said interaction, motivation. So this is a crash course in those different things that Hattie and May, they're researchers, that really impact student learning, right? So collective teacher efficacy has the 1.57, having the most. Self-reported grades, a teacher estimates of achievement, cognitive task analysis, response to intervention, 1.29, a jigsaw method, 1.20. So it really looks at those different things that happens in a classroom, right, that can really drive learning in students. Okay, so if you look at collective teacher efficacy, just like the previous speaker had said, yes, is really number one. But what part of that, what are the different things that teachers do that can have the most impact? Next slide. So feedback and the role of planning in providing effective feedback. This feedback is one of the most powerful factors implicated in academic learning and resultant achievement. The not so good news is that the variability of the effectiveness of feedback is huge. Okay, that is where the planning comes in. For many students, classrooms can be akin to video games without the feedback, without knowing what success looks like. So imagine a child playing video games and they don't know if they've won the coins. There's no drive to continue going to the next level, They don't even know if they're going in the right direction, right? So not just feedback like, oh, you've done well, you haven't done well, but feedback as to what is needed to achieve success. And this is where planning and providing effective feedback really comes into play. When we're thinking through a criteria of success, feedback needs to be aligned to standards. It needs to be clear and criteria oriented. It needs to be timely, It needs to be intrinsically valuable. So not just doing for doing sake. Timely, it has to be time bound. It must be objective. And next step facing and transferable. Okay, so now we've moved on. We've talked about the trio: outcomes, objectives, and feedback. Okay, oftentimes a teacher can give a child an assignment and the child doesn't even know what they need to do. No rubric, just do this thing, just do this project and make sure it's good. How does that child know that, no, if I do A, B, C, D, I'm getting 100% or roughly 100%. If I don't do A, B, C, I'm going to get a 50%. How do they know? So planning for effective feedback is also things like creating a rubric, creating a criteria for success for any assignment, even something as simple as a journal entry can have a criteria for success. Let's say children are writing every morning when they come into class in a notebook. They're responding to something on the board or to a written prompt. You can have a criteria for success for that. Okay, is it focused on the prompt? Has the child internalized and used their own connections or their own experiences to understand it more? You need to be able to give children a rubric or a criteria for success for them to know that they have been successful. There's no point of hiding like there's one magic that will happen. No, we're not supposed to be custodians of knowledge where we're hiding information and children have to scavenge the depths of the earth to figure out how they'll do well. No. We are supposed to give them the structures and in place. So they don't do well, they actually know how. They actually know how. They can improve. Next slide. Okay, so criteria for an effective objective. We've gone back to the objective now. So an effective objective is feasible. It could actually happen within the 90 minutes or 45 minutes that the time that has been set. So you don't create an objective that's supposed to be for an entire unit to create it for a lesson. No. Is it feasible? Is it something that could actually happen within that time? Is it bite-sized? Is it focused? Is it measurable and feedback friendly? Is it measurable and feedback friendly? So by the time you want to give a child feedback on how they've done, you can point to the particular aspect they're having trouble with. You don't have to figure it out all again. So it has to be measurable and it has to be feedback friendly. And it has to align to the general standards or the unit trajectory. So where the unit may be going, where the scheme of work is going. Is it aligning to this larger goal we have in place? Then does it use the task verb aligned with student performance? We talked about the Bloom's taxonomy and the revised Bloom's taxonomy. And then last but not the least, it clearly conveys content, process, and product. The objective clearly conveys content, process, and product. Next slide. Now, there's an author, he's an education reformer. His name is Doug Lemov, and he wrote this book called Teach Like a Champion. Teach Like a Champion. And there are many strategies that are listed in that book about different things that teachers can do that are focused and that worked promptly. It's like having a toolbox. Teach like a champion. And in Teach Like a Champion, in the old version, I believe it's number 6. In the updated version, it's strategy number 16. And strategy number 16 is planning with the end in mind. Look at this quotation. When teachers are designing lessons, they often focus on the activities and instruction rather than the outputs of the instruction. Therefore, it can be stated that teachers often focus more on teaching rather than learning. And this is from a book called Understanding by Design. Okay, Understanding by Design. So this is something that a lot of teachers do, and this is a mistake that many of us do, but there is hope. We need to be focusing on the outputs, not just the activities and instruction, and we need to move progressively toward the learning of the students and away from the teaching. How does your teaching translate to learning? How? Look at this example of an objective. Compare Supreme Court rulings related to civil rights. Okay, they've told you the understanding, and they've also mentioned what the exit ticket could be. Exit ticket is a form of feedback that teachers can use to hear from the horse's mouth. Quickly, you get to quickly hear what students have to say on a specific topic or a specific area of concern. Oftentimes, exit ticket can even be a sticky note. It can even be, what did you learn today? What did you take away from today's lesson? In their own words, or it could be something more specific and strategic. That's fine, but it's in their own words. So look at this one. Write a thesis that argues the extent to which civil rights have grown over time. Wow. Then look at the activity. Supreme Court ruling and sort and timeline extravaganza. This is heavily packed. And this exit ticket may not be at the end of one lesson. Definitely this type of exit ticket that's talking about a thesis, and we're talking about a thesis statement, probably. This is maybe something that is done at the end of a subunit or an actual unit because it's very much in depth. Now, if you look at the other side, same purpose. Compare Supreme Court rulings related to civil rights. Now look at the activity. Mock trial, where students dress up as their favorite Supreme Court justice. Let us look at the difference. See the difference. Both of them have the same purpose. But this first one has really honed in on the understanding, the exit ticket, and then the activity that ties everything together. Whereas the activity for this second one is not related to the understanding, is not related to the exit ticket, is not really even related to the purpose. Compare Supreme Court rulings related to civil rights, and you are telling people a mock trial where they are just dressed up. Yes, a mock trial can be useful, but what is the criteria for success for that? It's not listed. We need more information. But the first one has really honed in. Okay, so planning with end in mind is important. Next slide. So I'm not really going to go into this much because we're pressed for time, like I had mentioned earlier on. So it's important for students to be able to set their own learning. And this is not going to happen overnight. Before students can set their own learning goals, teachers should have already established a culture of where they're creating children-centered or student-centered goals first. As teachers are doing that and students are accustomed to acting on or to learning from goals that have been set but that are student-centered, it then becomes easier for them to take it up a notch and create their own learning goals because they've been doing it already. When you have learning goals for students and it's not student-centered, it's just teacher-centered, it's virtually impossible for students to be able to create their own learning goals because they haven't seen it. So if we want students to be able to take charge of their own learning, including their goals, we need to be able to create student learning goals first with their input and then progressively work towards them doing their own. Okay, so this is an example of how that could be done. Next slide. Next slide. We've addressed some of this already. This is another way in which you can get feedback on part of the student. Okay, so and it's also embedded a reflection and refinement based on the feedback that we expect to get from students. And there are 5 key principles of feedback that moves learning forward. So number 1, feedback is about giving students next steps to move them on in their learning. It's not just saying you didn't do well in this, you didn't do well in that, you got this right, but why? Why? So students that are doing well, how can we move them forward? Students that are not doing well, also, how can we move them forward? It's all about progress. Feedback is about progress. It's not the same as marking, as I've indicated, and it should be more work for student than the teacher. Never work harder than your students. If we are doing all the work and students are just at the recipient end, they're just receiving. They're not actually learning, right? They're not engaging the material the way that is expected. So that signifies a problem. Feedback should always make students think. It should also cause a cognitive reaction and not necessarily an emotional one. And this is why a criteria for success, a rubric, is so important. Because if students know, it's not that I don't like your face, so look at the rubric. You did well in this aspect, you didn't do well in this aspect, you didn't do well, you were supposed to give 3 examples, you only gave 1. If all of those things are listed out, they now start thinking. They start thinking, how could I have come up with better examples? Not, this teacher must not like me. Because the facts are right in front of them. Okay? Then number 5, students must receive feedback in some form on a regular basis. It must be regular and it must be timely. You cannot have an assignment that you gave to students in the very beginning of the term and it's just the end. You are giving them feedback. What has happened in between? So you also have to be mindful of the time you have, mindful of your resources when expecting feedback from students. You have to be realistic because of the goal of the marking is to get feedback that can immediately change student learning. It has to be something that's actually feasible. So in essence, you can't give them an entire chapter to write, like a book, like a thesis level chapter for a book to do in 2 days. Before they write it, before you get it back, before you can give feedback. So you have to make sure that, yes, the objective you set for them is feasible, but it's pushing them, right? It's pushing them forward, but that is also realistic in your expectation so that you can give regular, timely feedback that can push them forward. Next slide. So this really talks about traditional marking and then the feedback approach. Okay, this is something that you have access to later on. Next slide. Another way in which you can give feedback is you can do minus, equal, and plus. I love this one. I love for a teacher that's pressed for time, and if it's not like maybe homework, if it's just something homework where you can just quickly see how they've done, doesn't require too much thinking, it quickly lets them know where they are. Another version of this is check, check plus, check minus. Okay, this piece, and this is what it means. This piece of work is not as good as your last. This is equal to your last, and this is better than your last. Quick feedback. Next. So this is about we're rounding up. Which of the feedback techniques would you like to try out in your classroom and why? And does this type of feedback create student-centered learning? Why or why not? Okay, so indicate in the chat. And then the last one, as we round up, the last slide. 3, 2, 1. 3 things you learned, 2 things you would like to learn more about, and 1 thing you will put into practice. So what are 3 things you may have learned? What are 2 things you would like to learn more about? And 1 thing you would actually put into practice? Okay, so we have come to an end of this session. Normally, like I said, this session would have been about 90 minutes, but we had to significantly bring it down to about an hour. All of these resources will be available on lagoslearnstogether.com. This includes the run sheet and the actual deck, the PowerPoint deck. I want to thank you all for your participation today. And I look forward to seeing you soon on our next session. Thank you and God bless you all.